Dan Goodstein here. I'm back with part two of our executive interview series discussion with Tom Taulli, technology contributor for Forbes magazine and author of books on both RPA and AI. Tom, good to have you back.
Great, thanks.
So last time we spoke, we focused mostly on RPA, and so I wanted to
Mhm,
focus on AI this time, another
mhm,
area that you cover, right?
mhm.
I'm a big believer in the idea of AI being able to supercharge RPA implementations. Do you agree? And if so, where do you see that happening right now?
Definitely. I mentioned my book. I have a chapter on AI. I have a chapter on the future of RPA, and I talk a lot about AI. And my conclusion is that if you want to know the future of RPA, then you should probably understand what AI is all about. RPA, when you really think about it, is creating bots that are stupid. I mean, they don't learn. They just, you know, replicate a process. I mean, RPA has been around for 20 years. It started as screen scraping, and it has evolved substantially and significantly over the years. But at the end of the day, a bot is not that smart, and that's why. And that's the problem is that when a process changes, the bot breaks. That's why you have to have these centers of excellence. You have to have these monitoring systems in place, and that makes it difficult for it to scale. So bring AI into the discussion, and what it can do is get a little smarter. It can take advantage of the data that's being created and the changes, and it can start thinking about thinking about things. It's not really thinking, but it's you know doing it's looking at patterns and it's understanding, it's gaining some more insight into what's happening within the processes, and it might suggest ways to optimize, or it might say alert you that there's a problem, and maybe we need to change this process, um, or it can analyze the process. We have this thing called process mining that analyzes log files and gets a sense of what your employees are doing and how they can do things better. So I think AI is definitely, if you look at the major players right now, they're all talking up AI. They're all investing heavily in this. So I think in the next few years, we're going to see a lot of great innovation.
So in general, Tom, what has you most excited within the AI space right now? Are there any particular use cases, technologies, or even technology players that you're tracking?
Yeah, it's interesting. Forbes, I get a lot of pitches, and maybe a couple of years ago, I maybe here and there get a pitch about AI, of AI company. Now today I get probably every pitch is a COVID-19 pitch.
Right.
But in the last year, it seems like now I do write a lot about AI, so maybe it's a little self-selected, but I do get quite a few AI pitches. So I see a lot of companies, and I would say one observation is that there's a lot of wannabe AI companies.
Yep.
uh, if a company doesn't have huge amounts of data, it's hard for it to be an AI company. Google can be an AI company because they have billions of users. Microsoft can. Uh, Facebook can be a great AI company, and it is. So, take everything with a grain of salt. So I would say that what I'm finding exciting right now about AI, just in general, is the sophistication of the deep learning models are just mind blowing. You have what are known as parameters. Just the different types of elements in your data that you're trying to understand, and it could, for an autonomous car, it could be something like, a a pedestrian, but it's not just that's not just one parameter. There's so many different parameters in that pedestrian to get a sense of that. Yes, that is a pedestrian. We don't want to run over the pedestrian. We want to make sure the pedestrian is safe. So, um, to give you a sense of what's going on, there are models now and Microsoft is doing this, and they actually open source some of the software for this, that you can have models that have over 100 billion parameters. 100 billion parameters. You imagine trying to, there's no human on the face of the earth
Of
that could
course.
even can figure that out. So, there's a company, I taught this company called Fortinet. They have these billion parameter models that are basically, they have a hard time hiring security analysts. It's just so much work to be done. There's just so many cyber problems. And so they built these 100 billion and these billion parameter models to essentially replicate the security analysts to evaluate what's going on in real time. Um, Companies like OpenAI, Microsoft recently invested $1 billion into this. They're trying to do the strong AI. That's, most AI, pretty much all AI today is weak AI. It means it's focused on a certain very narrow use case.
Yep.
Strong AI means, it's like science fiction, it's Star Trek and things like that. So OpenAI makes it very clear they're all about the Star Trek part of AI. They're going really big. Go to YouTube and put in open mind and Rubik's Cube, and you'll see a robotic hand that just looks lifelike, that has computer vision in it. It's holding the Rubik's Cube, and within 4 minutes, it solves it. So it may sound kind of, not too like too tough. It's a really tough problem to solve.
Right.
We are making advances that I think a lot of people thought we would not be making as soon as we are making them. So I think this type of technology in the next few years is really going to just be going to blow your mind. It's going to blow your mind.
So you bring up a great point about the data, right? I speak to a lot of clients that are hell bent on their own algorithms and building stuff in house, but they just don't have the data to really
Yeah.
model it out and get the benefits. And I agree with you about the some of the broader AI. I'm wondering, the narrow AI or the weaker AI though, is that a better opportunity for someone, maybe a mid-sized company, to get started, or what's the
Yeah.
low-hanging fruit for companies to get some near-term ROI if they don't have a big R&D budget, for example?
Right. Great question. Uh, a good example of this is what IBM did with Watson. Watson beat the Jeopardy champions.
Yeah.
I mean, and this was years ago. So after that happened, they said, well, let's just try to cure cancer. We'll try that. I mean, I applaud them for being bold, but it didn't work. Cancer is still around. And in fact, it actually gave some cases, the models gave bad results. So for those, I would say, even if you're a big company, don't try to boil the ocean. Don't try to cure cancer. The first thing is evaluate what you have. What data do you have? Do you even have the data that can solve the problem you're looking to solve? And if you don't, can you get that data? Or how about this? Do you already have systems in place that offer AI that you don't even use? I mean, Salesforce has Einstein. With Einstein, you can do all these predictions with data. You don't have to do anything with the data because the data is already there. It's already been structured. It's already been wrangled. You don't have to do anything about the models because they've already created the models for you. And you don't have to do anything for the deployment of the models because they make it easy to deploy your AI. It's all there on a silver platter. So start there. Start with what you have and see and learn. So start on the training wheels. Start with that. And then look at, okay, maybe it can only take us so far. So let's think about maybe there's an off-the-shelf product that can do something a little bit more sophisticated. We have some extra data, and maybe let's get an off-the-shelf product and then try that for a little while. And then maybe think about having like a really full-blown project, an AI project, but go in steps. If you try to do everything all at once, you probably, and if you look at a lot of the studies from IDC, and most of these projects don't get out of the pilot phase because I think they try to boil the ocean.
Yeah. I think I read a report. I see like 35% of organizations are getting AI models into production. So you
Yeah.
think it's mostly that kind of staging, or is there any other factors?
I brought the change management with RPA. Clearly, that's the case with AI. I've talked to companies like LinkedIn and Adobe, the executives there, and they have training programs. I mean, it's almost they have a college of AI in their companies
Right.
with months of instruction for anybody and everybody. It doesn't matter if you're technical or not. Because if you don't know what AI is and don't really know what deep learning is versus machine learning versus NLP, are you really going to be successful with this technology? And I don't think so. It's kind of complicated. And it's also a little, requires a change of mindset because AI is not going to give you a perfect answer. It's based on probabilities. It's based on patterns and sometimes black boxes when it comes to deep learning. So it's a little different from what you're usually accustomed to with just running a standard spreadsheet and looking
Right,
at conversions and churn rates and stuff like that.
right, right. So Tom, how about now kind of in the post-COVID world, this new normal? We talked about this in the previous interview a little bit as it related to
Mhm.
RPA, but
Mhm.
we're seeing we're seeing revolutions in
Mhm.
retail, hospitality, travel, government, even education, right? Where
Yeah.
do you see AI playing a role here?
On the COVID side, uh, I think where where you know, and it's a good question because there's a lot of things that could be done, but I think probably initially is getting better about prediction models. Uh, it's like supply chain. The COVID thing really exposed a lot of the problems that we have with our supply chain. We couldn't get toilet paper,
Right?
for a period of time. I mean, as simple as that. Uh,
Very
that should not have happened. So I think what's happening now because of that, companies are rethinking and saying we got to get better. We got to get more sophisticated with our forecasting. And forecasting, people don't think of that as AI, but it is a form of machine learning. And I would say that you know, it usually is, it just hasn't evolved as much as it should have. And I think COVID has exposed that. So I don't know if companies are going to, really change in a fundamental way, but I think some companies will and start rethinking of how they model uh, important parts of their business like supply chain, so they're not caught in a bad situation if something extraordinary happens to their business. And I think they'll also realize that as these prediction models get better, they're going to have better margins, they're going to have better returns,
right.
more revenues and happier customers. So I think that's a positive that'll probably come out of it.
And so much of digital transformation and enterprises is about the aggregation of and convergence of technologies, right,
Mhm.
towards a particular outcome, right? Are there any other technologies that people should be looking at embedding into their stacks beyond RPA and AI that you're following?
Well, definitely the cloud. Although I think that's kind of been overused, but I think the cloud should not be ignored. I do think looking more at web services and APIs, which is kind of a bit complementary to RPA, which you can't usually do in RPA. You can maybe you can do it with the API. So I think we've seen with Twilio and some of these great companies and successful companies that the API can be a great help. So I think when it comes to digital transformation, and I think the IoT part, I think is another. I think it kind of amazes me. I mean, IoT always gets a lot of buzz, but it seems like a lot of companies really don't do much about it.
I agree. Agree.
I think with 5G though, I think what's going to happen is that I think companies are going to really see the value of IoT. So I think they're going to have to, you know, get 5G on the radar screen, combine that with AI, IoT, and I think that could be a very powerful combination. But for the you talk about the stack, and I think that's a good idea to think about. What are the technologies out there, but also, just because it's AI and AI is very powerful doesn't mean you have to use it all the time.
Mm.
Maybe a simple statistical model could be just fine and a lot less work. So I think technologies are tools for us to do things, and you just want to make sure you're using the right tool for the right goal. The other thing I'm pretty excited about, but I think it's probably 5 or 6 years down the road, are the quantum computers. I just think they're fun to think about because we've lived in the binary world of ones and zeros,
Yeah.
since the dawn of the computer age, and now we're going into the quantum age because these computers are getting it's getting so small and to the atomic level. And there should be exciting developments there with AI and how that interacts with quantum computing. But I would not necessarily recommend putting that on your stack right now.
Don't put
But
that. Don't
yeah, it
budget for
just is
that quite
something.
yet.
Yeah, not yet. It's not ready for prime time. Yeah,
Tom Taulli, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives. Hope to have you back soon.
that's awesome. Thanks very much, and everyone be safe.
Thanks, Tom.